Hi, thank you for watching Digging to China. I'm Dong Xiong. The recovery of the global economy is under attack by high freight rates, which are likely to continue in the coming months, according to United Nations Conference on Trade and Development's Review of Maritime Transport 2021. The current surge in container freight rates, if sustained, could increase global import price level by 11% and the consumer price levels by 1.5% between now and 2023. As consumers spend their money on goods rather than services during pandemic lockdowns and restrictions, demand for goods surged in the second half of 2020 and into 2021. Working from home, online shopping, and increased computer sales all placed unprecedented demand on supply chains. The surge demand was met with supply-side capacity constraints, including container ship carrying capacity, container shortages, labor shortages, continued on and off COVID-19 restrictions across port regions, and the congestion at ports. This mismatch between surging demand and a de facto reduced supply capacity then led to record container freight rates on practically all container trade routes. For example, the shipping route from Shanghai to Europe, the spot freight rate for the 20-feet container was less than $1,000 in June 2020. It jumped to about $4,000 by the end of 2020 and rose to $7,400 by the end of July 2021. On top of this, cargo owners faced delays, surcharges, and other costs, and still encountered difficulties to ensure their containers were moved promptly. Most freight transportation contracts are negotiated annually, although many large shippers may have multi-year agreements with a variety of carriers. With high shipping demand still far outweighing tight capacity, transport operators have leverage to raise prices when negotiating new contracts. Ocean shipping executives say they expect the rates set in many annual contracts will double compared with agreements struck earlier this year before supply chain bottlenecks squeezed capacity. Some trucking companies project double-digit growth in contract rates for 2022. In the U.S., domestic shipping rates for moving goods by road and rail are up about 23% this year from 2020. Trucking companies and other logistic firms complain their own higher costs, including rising salaries as they have sought workers in a tight labor market. Delivery giants FedEx and UPS said the rates would go up on an average of 6% next year across most services, the first time in 8 years that either company had annual increases above 5%. Phil Levy is the chief economist for Flexport, a tech company for global logistics services based in San Francisco. He was a senior economist for President George W. Bush's Council of Economic Advisors as well. He told the Wall Street Journal that the typical transit time for a container in pre-pandemic days was 71 days. That's how long it took for a full container to depart from Shanghai, discharge in Los Angeles, proceed to a warehouse near Chicago, get trucked empty back to California, and then return to Shanghai. The current transit time is 117 days or more. The greatest delays are in the U.S. due to port bottlenecks and trucking shortages. The Los Angeles to Chicago leg, for instance, now takes 22 days, 12 more than before. It takes 33 days for the empty container to return to California compared with 20 in old days. The pandemic is at the root of the supply chain crisis. COVID-19 has led to work disruptions at the factories and the ports in China, with quarantines and shutdowns hitting the production and the movement of goods. China's zero-tolerance policy hit supply chain hard. For example, Yantian is a deep water port in Shenzhen, Guangdong, that specializes in handling containers of all sorts from feeders to very large container ships. One of the busiest ports in the world, it recorded a cargo throughput of more than 13,350,000 containers last year, a third more volume than the port of Los Angeles. In late May 2021, 5 crew members aboard a container ship docked there have tested positive for the virus. The port was closed and not receiving export containers ongoing for 1 week. Following strict protocols, all terminal workers and the citizens in the Yantian district are required to undergo COVID testing for 7 consecutive days. In addition, laden inspections have stopped periodically because of space limitations to store laden containers in the terminal. Traffic in the Yantian area was heavily congested, with the average queuing time at the Yantian port taking approximately 9 to 12 hours. Every time ports shut down, it disrupts container flow. Ports have fixed capacity and it cannot suddenly process 2 or 3 times as many ships once the lockdown is lifted. It is like a traffic jam caused by accident. It takes a long time to work it down. What is worse, the supply chain disruption is here to stay. 2 reasons. 1. Consumer behavior changed. U.S. consumers spent 69% of their money on services before the pandemic and 31% on goods. Now they spend 65% on service and 35% on goods. 2. This is not a normal economic downturn. While production decreases, but Americans get a lot more money than they normally do with a downturn because of government cash infusions. In other words, consumers have more money to spend, and their preference of what they spend is tilted towards goods. Generally speaking, the percentage of personal consumption spending on goods remains constant. It might move up or down by 0.2%, but pandemic changed that. The moves are 10 times more, 15 times more than usual. One way for the supply chain crisis to recede is for the pandemic to end, but each new variant has the potential to halt any improvement. Will consumers behave the way they used to before pandemic? According to Mr. Levy, it is possible they don't. Consumers are creatures of habit, and the pandemic has led them to take on new habits. Therefore, it is here to stay, at least for a while. This holiday season's short-term disruptions are tied to deeper structural problems that didn't emerge overnight and are likely to get worse. Shippers and retailers would have been better able to cope with this year's challenges if public and private leaders had not been so laser-focused on minimizing short-term costs such as labor and inventory. With supportive export-oriented policies and financial deregulation, companies have spent more than 30 years in the past reducing warehousing space, subcontracting and outsourcing production, restructuring work arrangements to cut costs, and delaying investment in transportation infrastructure. In other words, we thoroughly starved the redundancy and agility out of these systems and increased our reliance on imports, because doing so delivered shareholder profits and just-in-time access to cheap goods until the day the supply chains couldn't deliver. So it is not surprising that we now face a broken system with no easy fix. Making the economy and the society more resilient to all kinds of shock is a policy choice. Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. Just click the subscribe button right here. I'll see you again shortly. By the way, I'll release my next video on Monday, December 27 instead of usual Friday, because Friday is Christmas Eve. I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas and a great long weekend. I'll see you again on Monday. Until then, be well.